Uh, Good afternoon. This is the final class we're doing in our series. I think, like ending this series on this note, this is a informative, fun class that gives you some tools to use, pretty much immediately. They're not difficult to instructions are not difficult to follow. You're going to be learning about mantras. Before we start, what I'm going to present to you today is beneficial and helpful. But these are even more powerful and productive for you if they are given to you by a teacher with an unbroken lineage to the Buddha. We're going to be talking about the three different vehicle mantras. Obviously, the Vajrayana is much more mantra inclined than the Theravada and the straightforward Mahayana. So let's just get started here now. We always try to start everything basically from the basics, and the basics always are from the Theravada. And the Theravada has got basically one mantra, and it's the three jewel mantra. That's Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. They take a Sanskrit spelling of these, and it's Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. This mantra is done primarily in silence. The instruction is that you say each word. On the in-breath, you say the first syllable, and on the out-breath, you say the second syllable. It's impossible to breathe in and talk, so this is why it's done on a silent basis. The three jewels, this sounds like, well, there's not much to this. The three jewels is the primary foundation of all of Buddhism. When you become a Buddhist, it doesn't matter which of the three vehicles, you agree to take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And the Buddha obviously is the teacher, the Dharma is the teachings, and the Sangha is the community. So it might seem, simplistic, but it's, covering the basis. You also, when you agree to become a Buddhist, you will say the refuge prayer 3 times. And by saying this mantra over and over again, that fulfills that commitment. When we begin to talk about the Mahayana, the Heart Sutra is a very good place to start. If you recall in the class, How to Create Your Own Practice, we talked a great deal about the Heart Sutra. It's fairly common in all the Zen traditions to, in their practice, daily practice, they chant the Heart Sutra 3 times. The Heart Sutra is not long, so it's not like they're going to be having a major session just with the Heart Sutra. The important part of the Heart Sutra is to understand that it is, the real foundation of emptiness. And the sutra itself talks of Avolkiteshavara, Chenrezig, and Kwan Yin. Their discourse on emptiness. It's the primary discourse on emptiness in all of Dharma. And the mantra of the Heart Sutra is Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasam Gate Bodhisattva. This is one of the few mantras that can be translated. The literal translation is gone, gone, gone beyond, opposite disappear, absolute appears, which is a very interesting, but it's a good way to understand emptiness. That's what the mantra is trying to get you to understand. And what's important is when you start doing this mantra, emptiness will become more, you'll start to understand more and more about what emptiness really is. And that's why you would chant this mantra over and over and over. Someone asked me one time, well, how do I know that I, chanted this enough? You'll know that you chanted it enough when you become an enlightened being. An enlightened being is when you can totally comprehend, understand, and function in the state of emptiness. So this is a very good mantra for Vajrayana practitioners too. It's used quite a bit. So it's the Dalai Lama. He teaches the Heart Sutra, and that was one of the first teachings I took from the Dalai Lama. And we that follow Tibetan Buddhism or are Tibetan Buddhists, We look at the Dalai Lama as being the physical embodiment of Avolkiteshavara. So if you ever get a chance to have His Holiness, he teaches this quite often all over. Definitely try to attend that. It will be well worth your time. The other mantras, if you notice that the Heart Sutra, we're talking about sutras, there's not much deity focus on mantras with the Mahayana tradition. What they look at is, they're trying to, they primarily focus on understanding a certain teaching, like causation, the Dharma doors, may all beings be happy, the Four Noble Truths, this being that becomes, and the three refuges. The causation is how things cause and effect. May all beings be happy, the cause of happiness. The Noble Truths are the foundation of what the Buddhist entire teaching is. This being that becomes, that is emptiness. And the three refuges is obviously the three jewels. It's just a different dialect that's been written here. I will try reading some of these. As you know, I've had my mouth remade and remodeled, and I've got a lisp, so please bear with me. The causation mantra is Dharma, Etripavhava, Etum, Tesam, Tathagatiya, Hayavata. Dharma doors is Akuro, Mukha, Sarvadharmanaham, Avanat, Panavevat. May all beings be happy. Sabata, Sata, Sukha, Hantu. The Four Noble Truths. Arya, Sata, Dukkha, Samaja, Nirada, Marga. This being that becomes. Emisamam, Sati, Idam, Hote. The three refuges. Refuge, Buddha, Sarnagam, Gachyam. So if you want to have a deeper understanding of the Four Noble Truths, you would say the Four Noble Truth mantra. There's, the Heart Sutra, obviously, but this is also this being that becomes. And we've talked about Dharma being a lot like onion. There's many, many different layers. And, you will not, until you're an enlightened being, fully understand all the different layers. And so if you, for instance, you continually chant the Four Noble Truth mantra, then the Four Noble Truths will become clearer and clearer. And what you think now as being the definitive, you have a definitive answer of the Four Noble Truths, you'll discover the more that you chant this mantra that it's much, much deeper than you ever really realized it was. So that's one of the real main benefits of doing mantra work. It helps you take down another layer or two of the onion the more and more time you chant it. We talked about Kwan Yin in the class about Avolkiteshavara, Kwan Yin, and Penrensing. And this is it's basically the same mantra. It's just by different traditions. It's chanted, and the spelling is a little bit different. Jingjang Basel, Ganawasam Basel, Namo Chuguji Bu Mode Junju Basel. And if you look, they're all fairly similar translations. The great mantra, I vow to save all beings. And this tradition believes that it's just not just the sentient being running around the earth now, but the dead, those in the bardo. Great love and great compassion mantra. They believe in this tradition that it removes all kinds of suffering. And the Namu. It's nice. It talks about the great compassion of a mother's mind. And it also suggests that if you chant this mantra, any problem that you have will disappear. The Kwan Yin mantra, it's a lot like the Chenrezig mantra that is a very, very good mantra to chant and to begin to understand. We talk a lot about compassion. And I like the definition of compassion, that is, when you become enlightened, it is basically a level of compassion that you cannot begin to comprehend, in the states that we are in now. So compassion is a very, very big part of all Dharma tradition, not just it's Mahayana, Tantric Vajrayana, and the Theravada. Compassion is definitely one of the foundations of Buddhism. We talked in the How to Create Your Own Practice class a bit about the Pure Land. And Pure Land is the school and tradition that the main primary focus is on the Dhih, who's one of the Dhyani 5 Buddhists. And Pure Land is it's a place, it's a level of, I don't know exactly what dimension you might consider it to be in, but it is a place that you can be reborn in. And the mantra Namo Amita Bol, that's used to invoke the Western paradise of Amitihava Buddha, where is the guarantee or the teaching is that if you follow and say your mantras, do your practice, you can be reborn in the Pure Land. And that's not just Mahayana, that's also the Vajrayana. The Pure Land is definitely part of both of these true traditions. So Namo Mitra Bol, that invokes the Western paradise, and it is somewhat of a tribute to Amitihava Buddha. Namo Atta Shiji Nam Amota Gucci Nam Om Achyana Baba Jiri Jiri Home. This mantra is to help beings stuck in hell. Now, it's interesting when this helps you really understand two things. There's the bodhisattva ideal that we're going to help all sentient beings before we become enlightened. But the aspect of adding the Pure Land mantra is quite interesting too, and it's somewhat of a relief. When you become a Mahayana or Vajrayana Buddhist, you have the opportunity to take the vow of the bodhisattva, and that means that you will forego your own enlightenment until all sentient beings are enlightened. And that can sound, that's a real big commitment. And it can become kind of a bit depressing when you look at, all of what is considered sentient beings, just the ones we can see. From the animal realm, insects, there are many, many, many sentient beings to, help become an enlightened being. But, when you become an enlightened being or on the verge of being an enlightened being, or you do good deeds to end up in the Pure Land, what this is telling you, you don't have to be reborn as a human being running around the earth. You can be reborn in a Pure Land. Kalachakra teachings, there's a certain land, Jambhala, where you can be reborn. You can be reborn in these different realms, and you still be able to help sentient beings. As a matter of fact, you'll be able to. It'd be kind of like helping sentient beings on steroids, so to speak. You can reach out to a great many more sentient beings if you're reborn in some of these different, what are called lands or dimensions. They exist. You can't necessarily see them, but they're very real. And I think that you can take some comfort in the understanding that this tradition. The next one we talk about, Nichiren, Tibetan Buddhism. Becoming enlightened in one lifetime is not out of the question by any stretch of the imagination. It can happen, and that to me is a bit of a relief. We talked in one of the classes before about the Nichiren Buddhism. Nichiren Buddhism, a monk named Nichiren Shoshu, he took quite an interest in the Heart Sutra, and he understood it, and his translation of it was that, this is the definitive teaching of Dharma, and the entire school of Nichiren Buddhism. There's several different variations of it, but all of them, the primary practice is to chant the mantra Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. The Lotus Sutra teaches that all people have an innate Buddha nature, and are therefore inherently capable of attaining enlightenment in their current lifetime and present lifetime. Nichiren Buddhists believe that the spread of Nichiren's teachings and their effect on practitioners' lives will eventually bring about a peaceful, just, and prosperous society. So this mantra, there's a wonderful translation of it. Namyu means devotion, Myo, miracle, Ho, doctrine or law, Ren, lotus, Ji, flower, Kyo, sutra. So when you translate it, it is devotion to the miracle, supreme Lotus Sutra, Lotus Flower Sutra. And that is the primary practice of all of Nichiren Buddhism. They do not have much interest in any of the deities, even the Buddha. They don't have a Buddha front and center in any of their altars. They have what is called a Gohansen, and it is a painting in Japanese of the Lotus Sutra that you treat in a very, very reverent way. This is a fairly, somewhat at times, controversial set of Buddhism, and I don't agree with a lot of what people say. It's not a cult. That comes in when some people, this tradition is the only Buddhist tradition that very, very actively wants and tries to convert people to their form of Buddhism. His Holiness the Dalai Lama says before any major teaching or event that all schools of Dharma are right, and they all work. And those that say, well, it's only Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, you can say Omane Padme Hum, and I think you can get about the same benefit of that. That can be, if that's the only mantra you use, it's a very, very powerful and great mantra. It brings much benefit. So, it's not just the part of the, mantra that makes it a little bit, it's different, but it's not, really that different. The other thing of why we have all these traditions, the Buddha was very clear. He was going to teach some very contradictory things. And that was because, he understood that there's not just one disposition of a human being. There are many dispositions. And that's why there are these many different sects, schools, and traditions that are contradictory at times. And if you really have an understanding of emptiness, then you realize that they're not really that different at all. These are, the means to a very good end. So, you find what works for you. This is the first tradition that I ever, encountered. And it was, I think, a lot of people, not everybody, obviously two of my board members and very wonderful friends are Nichiren Buddhists. It was a good stepping stone for me. And I've talked to other people that their first experience with Dharma has been the Nam Myoho Renge Kyo Nichiren Buddhism. So let's jump now to Vajrayana, the Tibetan tradition. Mantras play a much bigger role in this tradition than in others. As a matter of fact, they even have it's kind of like a subset of, whole Mantrayana is the vehicle of the mantra. And there are some traditions that can be your primary practice is nothing but mantras. But the vehicle of the mantra is an easy but difficult path. It's easy to perform but difficult to understand. Primarily, that's because you can't translate all of these mantras, and you really don't need to. Because what a mantra does is it protects Trayati, it protects the mind, manas, at all times. Because when you chant the mantra and you're paying attention to the mantra, not daydreaming, your mind will be in the natural, clear, and peaceful state. And Buddha nature spontaneously manifests in that time. You can have these tremendous emotional moments and feelings where you've got this tremendous compassion. And that's, Buddha nature. When you feel a connection or you feel you want to really help people. That's the Buddha nature. Every sentient being has Buddha nature. It's like a seed that is planted, and at some point in time, it will sprout. There are basically, today we're going to cover 3 types of mantras: the deity mantra, the practice mantra, and kind of a daily practice mantras. The most important thing in the Tibetan tradition is that before you begin any practice, or maybe even a long mantra set, you want to generate motivation. We've talked about this many, many times. If you really want to find out the main aspect of karma, it's what was your motivation? Why did you do what you were doing? And what you want to do is you want to generate the right motivation. And the right motivation is to accomplish the goal of generate the mind seeking of enlightenment to help and benefit all sentient beings. And when you look at Mahayana and Tantric Buddhism, it's not myself first. It's I help all sentient beings, which can count you. I mean, you're a sentient being. So when you say this, it's not like you're shortchanging yourself. Some people said to me, I don't really feel comfortable, like I'm, being kind of left out of the quotient here, but that's not true. And you want to generate the right motivation. And a good motivation to chant before you begin a practice or a series of mantras is Dag Den Zen Don Drop Ladu, Dag Ji Chang Chum Sem Kiao Du. And that sets the tone about doing a practice or doing a series of mantra chants. I get asked all the time, because we're going to start here with deity mantras. I get asked a lot, are these different deities real? And the answer is, are they real? And then the next sentence they say, are they like mythological gods? First of all, they're not anything like mythological gods. Mythological gods are motivated by such things as jealousy. Buddhist deities are not motivated out of those things. The wrathful aspects, even, they're not motivated out of anything negative. And there's cases where the wrathful can help annihilate jealousy within you. That's the type of that's what you do wrathful practices. And we're not going to be covering any wrathful practices. Those you definitely need to have given to you a transmission by a teacher with unbroken lineage to the Buddha. But going back to, are these deities real? The answer is yes and no. We talked about relative and definitive truth. In a relative way, they are definitely real. But, definitive or absolute truth, when you get to a certain level, they're basically, you understand they're a manifestation like of everything, of emptiness. And eventually they serve no purpose. We've talked about there comes a point in time when you really understand this state of emptiness. Dharma doesn't even need to exist. It is. Everything just is. But a good way to think about this, if the deities are real or not, when you first start out, we talked about levels and layers and onions, that type of thing. When you first start out, you need something somewhat solid to focus on. And the deity is, quote unquote, much more real at that point in time. But as your practice deepens, you begin to understand it's not just the deity, it's the quality that the deity represents. That becomes, equally as important as, just the deity. The deity is not just something pretty to look at. You start developing a more profound understanding, and you understand then that, why you say these mantras is you want to, imbue yourself with the quality of the deity. So if you can remember that, that's a very good way of looking at it. Mantras became main part of the Tibetan tradition when Padmasambhava went to Tibet and slayed the dragons, it wasn't necessarily the dragons or demons he slayed, it was more aligned to the corruption that had overtaken a lot of the Dharma in Tibet at the time. Another way, just to mention it briefly, go back to, are they real or not? Kala Rinpoche, in his commentaries about the Chenrezig practice, which he said would be, if you just did that practice, that's all you really need to do. But his instruction, when you see these deities, or if you have the empowerment, you become the deity, it's not like you're this solid object. It's more like it's, kind of light. It's translucent. Like if you stuck your hand behind Chenrezig, you would see your hand. That's the type of way to really look at these deities after you get past that, very solid, quote unquote, real way of looking at them. So let's start by talking about a wonderful mantra that I like to do not too long after I've gotten up and awake. It's the mantra of Shakyamuni Buddha. And I find for myself, I start the day a little bit calmer. I sometimes still get a bit frantic first in the morning. I get overwhelmed with all the things I think I need to do or want to do. And by chanting this mantra 108 times, I feel a little bit more connected and calm. And, I think it also helps connect you with the Buddha nature. If you have a teacher, guru, that is inseparable from the Buddha. So you kind of understand that, you look at it. This is Tibetan Buddhism 101, that you see the teacher of the guru as the Buddha. You're not just like, thinking he's the enlightened wherewithal, but they're inseparable. And most mantras, you're going to say, the suggestion is 21, 3 times, 21, occasionally 28, or 108 times. And this mantra is not very, very long. So, saying 108 of these is not that difficult to do. By the way, after you've said about 100 to 200, even of the long mantras, you could become much more proficient, and it doesn't take that long to say the mantra. And the mantra of Shakyamuni Buddha is Tadyatha Om Muni Muni Maha Muniya Soha. Very nice mantra. If you do this, if you have an image of the Buddha, you see that golden light rays are coming out of the Buddha, and they are coming into you, imbuing you with the qualities of Shakyamuni Buddha. The next deity we're going to talk about is green Tara. Tara is, next to Avolkiteshavara, the most beloved deity of Tibet. Tara, we talked about coming from the, some of the teachings have been that Tara came from an eye of Avolkiteshavara, a tear from the eye of Avolkiteshavara, and to help him with reaching as many sentient beings to help become enlightened. There are many, many different forms of Tara, and it's all usually based around color. Certain different colors have certain different qualities. There's a wonderful practice called Praises to the 21 Taras. The green Tara, is the most common and popular in Tibetan Buddhism. And Tara is always there to help you. We talked about Kwan Yin, and Tara has many of the qualities of Kwan Yin. And when you remember that green Tara is part, basically, of Avolkiteshavara, you can kind of see where Tara has, a little bit of those qualities too, especially when you talk about, we showed in one of the mantras of Tara about the mother quality, and that's what green Terra has too. Symbolism is important, and that's why when you see these images of Terra, they all are going to pretty much look the same. You don't get to have artistic freedom to paint or create any of these deities. There's certain things that are very important, and like one of the most important things with Terra, is that she has one foot ready, to come off the Lotus throne and help you. Most all deities, they have their, legs and feet in the full Lotus position, but she's there to help you. Terra is very good to chant her mantra when you're afraid, when you're overwhelmed. And the teachings talk about one of the major aspects of Terra is that she helps you with the 8 external dangers. The 8 external dangers are lions, fire, serpents, thieves, prison chains, floods, and demons. Most of you are thinking, well, I don't really worry about those. Well, those are symbolic too. Lions are symbolic. That means pride. Fire is your anger. Envy is your is the serpents. Thieves are greed. Prison chains are wrong views. Floods are attachments. And demons are doubt and delusions. Teachings also, when you're talking about being afraid or needing help, she hears the cryings of all beings in samsara too. The important thing I think that is, at least it's important to me, what I like to remind myself about Terra, is that when you die, she helps you navigate the bardo. The Tibetan tradition believes the bardo is where, beings go after they have died. And you spend a minimum of 49 days in the bardo before you take an incarnation to a new body. And Terra helps you navigate and get yourself to the right place. The bardo can be a very overwhelming and frightening place for people. And it's important that someone or something, you can take certain, the poet teachings help you with that. And your root teacher will usually give you some direction about the bardo. That's taking me too much time about that. Very good for overworking and solving problems. This is the principal deity of His Holiness the Karmapa. He does green Terra practice. That's the first practice he does. First thing he does in the morning is green Terra practice. I've shared it with a few of you, and I'll mention it again. I've had some experiences which I am pretty sure were, Terra looking out for me. If you know, I've had I had some problems with alcohol, and I was living on the streets of Los Angeles. And I was in Santa Monica one day, and I was getting, this was tiresome. I had had enough, but instead of, maybe doing something constructive, I thought today would be a good day to kill myself. And the best way, the best thinking at the time was, well, why don't you just drink yourself to death? That's what you're basically doing, so let's just do it right one time. So I went to the neighborhood Vons, and I stole a big, big bottle of vodka. One of those, standard, one of those big things. Kind of looks like a jug. And I drank I came close to drinking half of it. It was really hard. I remember it was hard to get it down. And then I started walking, and I, couldn't stand up after probably 4 or 5 minutes. And as I fell down, I looked up at the sky, and I could see clouds, moving. And one of the clouds had a green hue to it. And the next thing I know, I wake up and I've got tubes down my throat. What had happened is I passed out right on the ambulance ramp at St. John's Hospital. And an ambulance nearly ran me over. And I was very fortunate that they jumped out and took care of me because I had stopped breathing. And, when I was kind of getting my thoughts about me, I saw everything green for a few seconds again. And I believe that was Terra looking out for me. my teacher here, Nichiren Rinpoche, he's made mention there have been some things that he attributes that Mahakala was looking out for him. So it's not unusual for people to have certain experiences. One of the reasons I wanted to do this class is that you might find, and this is by far, please understand, we're scratching the surface of mantras. We're not doing, we could do a complete class on Green Terra. We're scratching the surface, and you will find that there are certain deities or certain mantras that really resonate with you. And a lot of that can be past life situations, and you will find that there are certain deities that you really connect with and others that you don't. Certain traditions in the Tibetan schools, some of them have different deities that are primary deities for them. But Terra and Chenrezig are pretty much, all of the schools, the Sakya, the Nyingma, the Kagyu, and the Gelugpa. She's very well beloved by all of these traditions. The second Terra that is beloved and has a very good practice is the White Terra. I'm not trying to, she has many of the same qualities of mothering, looking out for, but her primary feature or benefit is longevity and long life. If you have certain illnesses, she's there to help you with those. And people say, well, why, this sounds a little contradictory. I mean, what are Buddhists, wanting to stick around that long for? And the teaching is very clear. Life is very fragile. Very, very fragile. We live in they call the land of 100 years, and we're going to talk a little bit later about, humans' arrogance, the way they look at time and space. But it's important, if you're a practitioner, and you get to the point where you understand that Terra is here to help you with longevity, that, you can get a lot more practice in if you live a little bit longer. And that's, one of the main attributes of Terra, to, have longevity in life for yourself, so you can practice more. And you can also use this mantra. I always suggest sometimes thinking a bit outside the box. Look at things in your life that you need longevity for. That can be, anything from, your work on down. And you can use this practice for that. Like with all these deities, I mentioned it with Shakyamuni Buddha. I didn't mention it with Terra, Green Terra. But you visualize the deity and the color that's associated with the deity. And that light goes into you, and you say the mantra 108 times. I'm pretty sure I told you, no, I didn't. The Green Terra mantra is Terra to Terra Tura Soha. Now you can go back through these. I think many of you will go through this discussion to write down some of the mantras that are, interest you at the most at this time. We're also probably going to put together a booklet with a lot of the mantras from this class and others, and we'll keep you posted about that. But White Terra's mantra is Terra to Terra Tua Mama Arya Punya Jihana Pushtam Kuru Soya Yasoha. So her mantra is a little bit longer. And I've also heard that a lot of people have had, feeling that they have done this meditation and chant with meditation and visualization. They visualize a person that they know that is very ill, receiving white light and Terra helping them, white Terra, white light. You can do these practices. It's very wonderful to do these practices, for other people. Because again, it's good to sometimes, if you're going to do a series of 108 of these mantras, is generate why you're doing it. And I want to mention one other thing about generation. We'll talk about dedication too. But somebody said to me, I'm about 70% about this, helping others first. And I appreciate that, somebody can be that honest. And, he asked me, can I kind of fake it till I make it? And I said, by all means, that's what most people do. A lot of people will say, yeah, I understand that bodhisattva ideal, and that sounds wonderful, but in the back of their mind say, this is overwhelming. So, you can cut yourself some slack. Sometimes people use Dharma to beat themselves up. I was one of those people at a certain point in time. And, when you do the generation for the right motivation, you do the mantras, and then we will get that back to dedication towards the end of this class. You start by generating, do the practice, and then you do the dedication, and that makes things complete. The next deity is Manjushri. Manjushri is the bodhisattva of wisdom, and this is probably, from what I've been told, this is the very first deity that is mentioned in the Mahayana sutras. The thing what is important about Manjushri is if you look at this sword on fire, it's cutting through ignorance. And either in the hand, the other hand where you see a lotus flower, it can either be that or a book, which is wisdom. The reason why Manjushri is such an important deity is to cut through ignorance is the key to enlightenment in many ways. When we talked about the three poisons, we talked about, the primary poison is ignorance, delusion. There's the attachment, craving, and greed. That's one. Aversion, hatred, and anger. That's the other. And then ignorance and delusion. And why that's important is because the root poison is ignorance. If we weren't ignorant to the truth, that's the reason we still fool around with attachment and aversion. We're ignorant to the truth about it. So if you can cut through your ignorance, by default, the other two poisons start to lessen. And by chanting his mantra, Om Rapatsana Dhih, the Dhih is usually the real strong. You say the Dhih in a very strong fashion. Some practices you will say the Dhih, after you do the mantra, you'll say the Dhih 108 times. But very important deity in the Tibetan tradition. And also, a lot of we're not talking too much about the Japanese and Chinese tantric practices, but Manjushri is one that is, mentioned very, very often. In the earliest Mahayana sutra, the Prajna Paramita Sutra, he figures in that in a very prominent way. The next deity and mantra we're going to talk about is Medicine Buddha. And Medicine Buddha is a very, very wonderful practice, and the benefits are immense. And when I say practice, there's like the Medicine Buddha practice, a sandana, what it's called, that's the practice. And you do, the practice, and you chant the mantra a bit, and, you end the practice. We're not getting into any of the practices per se, but I want you to understand, it's not just this mantra that brings the full benefit. That's why I'm saying if you are, you find your teacher, he will work with you about the deities that are, suit your disposition. But in the sutras it says, in the Tantric Sutras, that anyone that just hears the name of Medicine Buddha and his mantra will never be reborn in lower realms. And that includes animals. Some of us, I know my dog likes to practice with me. I think he gets some benefit. Maybe sometimes he gets more than myself. But if an animal hears Medicine Buddha and the mantra, they'll never be reborn in the hell realms. If you chant the mantra and the name of Medicine Buddha to someone even in a coma, if they hear the mantra or it's said to them, they will never have rebirth in a lower realm either. That's the thing. This Buddhist deities are not just there for Buddhists. They're there for everybody. They manifest in ways that people that are not Buddhist, can understand. I think that we've talked about a number of bodhisattvas that are running around that are not, Buddhists, like Gandhi and Martin Luther King. They weren't perfect beings, but they did some very, very amazing work in both, it was compassion, compassion and nonviolence. So as obviously for any illness, it's very good to visualize the blue light coming into you. And it's, thinking outside the box. Think of other areas of your life that are ill. Some of us have a sickness about relationships. We have the same things that we fumble with time after time. Other people, it might be money. You find something that is ill within you. Your anger. You could basically use this for anything that is causing you distress or grief. The mantra is Tadyatha Om Bhikandaza, Maha Bhikandaza, Raju Samagate Soha. It's a little bit longer mantra, but it's very, very powerful. We're going to talk about another mantra, but this one too will, if you eat meat, it will help purify any negative karma you have, and will help animals or other beings that you might ingest, help them be reborn in a much, much better realm. Another thing that I found interesting is a couple of friends of mine. One is a massage therapist and the other is a Reiki therapist. And they took a month-long medicine Buddha retreat, and they found it made their practices much, much deeper, and they felt that their healing ability was much, much, much better. So this is a very, very good deity to get to know more about. We talked about Vajrasattva, this mantra. It's next to probably the 100 syllable, the Chenrezig mantra. The most, maybe Tara's a bit ahead of it, but this is a very, very important mantra that you will find in just about every tantric practice that you do. There's a point in time that you will say this either 1 or 3 times, to smooth away any of the rough spots you had when you were, doing the practice. You chanted some things at the wrong time, or you screwed up the pronunciation. This just is basically saying, please forgive me, I'm doing my best. And this is a very, very powerful mantra to purify. If you are a little bit more advanced, you would hear about the 35 confessional Buddhas. But Vajrasattva practice is very, very, it purifies the negative karma. And we're going to talk about why we say it so many times. It's like, do I have that much karma to purify? But this is the long form of the mantra. Om Vajrasattva Ma Yamya Anu Palaya. Vajrasattva Tenapototisha. Jedo me bihava. Sutoshoa me bihava. Supashoa me bihava. Anaratu bihava. Sarva siddhi me priyatsa. Sarva karma susame. Sisam Surya Kuruham. Ha 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 ho. Bhagavan Sarva Tathagatya Ta Vavra Mame Munche Vadra Vama Mahasamisat Hom Fe. And we'll talk a little bit more about this mantra. But you can also use the straightforward short mantra. Most all of these mantras, there's a long form and a short form. And the short form of Vajrasattva, it's very equally good for purifying, is Om Vajrasattva Hom. Sometimes if you're you're a Tibetan practitioner, you say, I do Om Benzo Sato. And that's, the Tibetan tradition does not usually say Vajrasattva. It's Om Benzo Sato. But what's important, every day we probably break a vow or two, or step on something we shouldn't. We commit karmic transgressions daily. And what this does is it helps purify those. Very, very good thing to do is at the end of the day, I like to, I would think about, the day in detail, things I was not that pleased with myself about, and, things I could have done differently. And then I will chant this long mantra 28 times. As I chant it, I feel the white light of Vajrasattva coming through the crown of my head, purifying my karma and helping me get more in touch with the Buddha nature. So, this is a very good thing. If there's anything in your life that needs purification, you're in a relationship that needs to be purified, this is a very good mantra to do. I always say to think outside the box a little bit. You don't need to get, way, way out there. But, when you look at the qualities of these deities, look in depth within yourself of how that deity might be beneficial to you. As we get a little bit more wealth deities, and that's kind of a touchy subject, because people say to me, I thought you Buddhists weren't this attachment. I've heard enough about it. Money seems to be the problem. You think of money attaching and greed, what have you. The thing about it is, these wealth deities, it's not the money that is the problem. It's the attachment. And in some cases, the aversion to money that is, the real problem. You can be ignorant about it too. But there's nothing wrong in and of itself of having money. It's your attachment and clinging to the money, especially if you decide that your value is dependent on how much money you have. I have $1 million, so I'm better than you. There's no human being on this planet that is better than anyone else. No one. The drunk bum you see on the street is no less important, than His Holiness the Dalai Lama. His Holiness is is up there as far as the, enlightenment stage, but he's not better. And he'd be the first to tell you, I'm not better. There are 21 wealth deities. Today we're going to concentrate on 3 of them. The other reason why money is something to be concerned about is the Buddha was saying, you need to have money so you don't have to worry about your practice. You have enough money, you can practice, and you're not worried about, rent, light's going to be taken off. And the other thing is that, your monasteries and your Dharma centers, they survive by your donations. I've always said $1 million gives you 1 million different ways to do good and 1 million ways to do you harm. It's all up to you. Again, outside the box, think of things that you need to have, wealth of knowledge, wealth of patience. And the thing about this also is, if you have problems with money, I have had money issues a lot in my life. Everybody has a issue that, some people's relationships, some people's money. It's not been necessarily that I didn't have money. It's that sometimes I had money, it was a real, I made some very good money in the professions that I did. But, the money didn't do me a lot of good. So this practice helps you, either relax or pay a little bit more attention. It helps you with your whole concept of money and wealth. And the other thing that's really important, when we talked about right motivation, a wonderful thing to do is when you're doing these wealth deity practices, you do them for people in poverty or suffering sentient beings that money would help. And that includes you. Again, if you got the motivation right, you get the benefit. It's kind of contradictory, and not contradictory, but it's the tricky part of this process is, the more pure your motivation is, the more merit you will receive. But on the other hand, if you're doing this to get more merit, it's not going to be that great. There'll be some, but not as much as it could be. So that's why you generate, when you're doing this, you generate the right motivation, and, to do it for all beings that suffer. And today there's a lot of beings that are suffering with, the amount of people living on the streets in this country is, it's disgusting. For a country that can find $2 billion a year, $2 billion a week for 10 years to play a war. One of them we had absolutely no business in. We really have no business in any war. But we still have people living on the streets. The talk about the Jambhalas, and they can be wealthier. They're called Jambhalas or Jambhala. Both are correct. Story is that the Buddha's his cousin, very very jealous of the Buddha. He planned on throwing rocks at him, and as he threw them, the Jambhalas, they protected the Buddha. They manifested in front of him, and two were hit in the head, and one was hit in the stomach. And the practice, besides the liturgy of the practice, is that you pour water over the deity's head while you chant the mantra and snap your fingers. And that's because, one took one in the head, two took one in the head, and one took one in the stomach. That's why you do the practices the way that you do. Some people think that all the Jambhalas are manifestations of Chenrezig. Some think that only some of them are. That really doesn't matter. The thing that matters is your motivation and how you do, this chant. And I'm going to give you some direction that is a little bit more, and a couple of these things. Start with the Jambhalas, a little bit more than just chanting the mantra. The most popular, common, and some people think most powerful of the Jambhalas. I think I've used the word powerful. That's not a really good word to use. Beneficial, extremely beneficial. Is the Jambhala. Some people think that instead of Chenrezig, Ratnasambhava, that's one of the other five Buddhas that Buddha family had. That's who this deity is the representative of. But anyway, all Jambhalas, you're going to see, most of them, if they're seated, they're going to have one foot ready to get on the go to help you. And they're always going to be holding a mongoose. And when you do the visualization, you see primarily out of the mongoose, you see riches, money, jewels. I like when I do the practice, I see opportunities. But whatever you are doing this practice about, you see that coming out of the mongoose. And the reason is the mongoose, his enemy is the snake. And that, the snake symbolizes, we talked about it, greed, hatred, and the rejection of generosity. So what the mongoose does is he is the one that helps keep your wealth pure. If you want to, don't have a really good motivation for doing this practice, I want to have this money to harm somebody. If you have that, well, the mongoose helps, change your position on that. The practice that you do with these deities is, if you have a statue or something, and we probably will do a class about Jambhala, but most of you don't have a statue. So what you do is you look at an image of the Jambhala, and you see that you're pouring water over his head. And as you're doing that, you say the mantra, and the mantra is Om Jambhala Jalandhari Soha. And the thing that the instruction is that you, with your left hand, as you start to say the mantra, you snap your fingers. And that's, Lama Zopa Rinpoche says that's, to help the state of emptiness, be part of the process. So you snap your fingers, you say this mantra at least 108 times. The more in need you might be, the more you would probably say the mantra. But, say it at least 108 times. So the thing I want to also, he removes poverty within all 6 realms. And some say he increases virtue, lifespan, and wisdom too. These deities, it's not like they just have one specific thing they can do. And many of them overlap from one or the other. The white Jambhala, he removes the suffering of poverty, sickness, bad karma. Some teach that he averts disaster. And, that's the thing is that they all have the major underlying thing of wealth, but they each have a little bit of a unique twist that they, can give you. And this is somewhat of a wrathful looking, but it's not considered wrathful. He's just very stern looking. And again, there's the mongoose. He's either seen riding a dragon or a snow lion. And the same thing with the mongoose. Excuse me, drink here. So he's got the sword. Sometimes it's not quite a sword; it's more of a staff, and that cuts through the issues that you have with your finances. And he's also usually holding a wealth banner. And you do the same thing. Let's go back to that. You do the same thing if you're doing this practice. If you're wanting to make an offering, so to speak, or give an offering, or do this. Excuse me. You do this practice. You pour the water, see it, visualize it pouring over his head, coming out of the mongoose, and you snap your finger. 108 times is good. This mantra is Padma Koda Area Jambhala Hiradaya Fe. So now we'll go to the Black Jambhala. The Black Jambhala is, so he's also the Hindu god Kugra. Now, some of these deities we have, they are, rooted somewhat in some of the Hinduism. Doesn't mean that, some people said, well, this tantric system, it's just basically some people that have ripped off Hindus. And, I think Bob Thurman gave the best answer I've heard about that, and with an explanation. It would have been much, much easier at the time that if these Buddhists would have just said, we'll be Hindu instead. Buddha gave the teachings on Tantric Buddhism. He did not teach it to that many people. You have to have a very certain disposition to practice Tibetan Buddhism. And like I've said, it's not for everybody. But, so anyway, he's one that is, if you're experiencing, extreme financial difficulties, and also I was interesting. Somebody said I was taught that if you're needing money for a retreat, this is the guy to go to. But the same situation. I think the thing to remember with this is the extreme financial difficulties. You see him standing over a human body, which also is symbolism that he helps subdue the human ego and eliminates greed. So let's say that you're having an issue with greed. You now have some knowledge about a deity that helps you with greed. And so you can do this practice. Not necessarily that you're even looking for wealth. You just want to kind of stamp out the greed. Different about this deity is that the instruction is never more than 7 or 21 mantras. And his mantra is Om Indriya Yani Makam Parama Smarya Soha. And you would do the same thing. You would snap your fingers and off you would go. So it's really important, especially if we're talking. Let's say that you're going to do the, any of these, but we'll just say the Yellow Zavahala. We talked about the generation. You can go back and look at. I'm generating the right motivation for doing this. I do the mantras and the visualization, and then I need to dedicate the merit. Dedicating the merit. And that's another thing. Lama Zopa Rinpoche, I've learned a lot about mantras from his works. And he is probably one of the foremost, the dedication of merit is really, really important to him. And his explanation has always been amazing to me that, if you don't dedicate the merit, it's like blowing up a balloon. I think it's like, you blow up a balloon and you don't tie it. The air simply goes out of it. When you dedicate the merit, that ties it. That finalizes that is, it's not going to be running around. the ethers. It's doing what it's supposed to be doing. And all dedications are basically going to say something like this: to the merit may I soon attain the enlightened state of Buddhahood, that I may liberate sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious bodhicitta mind in me, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. So what you're saying is, here I understand. I'm dedicating this state of enlightenment, that I attain the state of Buddhahood. Not so I can be special and sit alone by myself. No, it's that I can liberate sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious bodhicitta mind in me not yet arise and grow. You understand that is within you. So it's very, very important to dedicate merit. When you're talk to you about practices, whenever you do, like Chenrezig practices Sindana medicine, but in any of them, every practice in Tibetan Buddhism, Vajrayana Buddhism, it closes with the dedication. And I don't think enough people really understand why the dedication is so important. Some people just like to skim over that. Dedication is more important, I think, than the actual practice itself. So I've had many people ask me about this since they found out we were going to do just about this class. Some people, I think, a lot of people, this is the reason you took the class, or are taking a class. And this is the antidote for astrological, and there should have been a apostrophe there. Astrological is one word by itself. Feng shui, unauspicious days. The Tibetan tradition has its own astrological system. It's very different than Western and somewhat different than Chinese. And a lot of it is based on what days are auspicious to do certain activities. I think, I mentioned to you the reason we do the class on these scheduled every other week is I did the calculations for Ryan and myself, and the best day of the whole month, maybe one of the best days of the year, is the day we got married, last Sunday. So, there's times, though, we have to do certain things, and it's not the most auspicious time to do that. We might, talk a little bit more in depth someday about the astrological system. The Tibetans have a lot to do with the Black Hat sect of Feng Shui. There are certain times that, if you believe in Feng Shui, there's got something that is kind of hinky and you don't know, you can't knock a wall down or something. So this helps these. And so unauspicious days, astrological, Feng Shui. For myself, I'm not that big about Western astrology. I think there's something to it, especially if the Chinese Tibetan, it revolves more around the moon, which we know by any stretch of the imagination has definite effects on people. But, I hear a lot about this Mercury retrograde, and that's something that, either my mind was focused too much on it and I was manifesting something because I thought more than I should have been. But it's been a problem for me, and a few people that I've shared this with that thought that their Mercury retrograde was a big issue, they found this to be very helpful. And some people, by the way, there's Tibetan Buddhists that they don't want to have anything to do with astrological, Feng Shui, unauspicious, and that's fine. I think certain people, personally, I think certain people it affects and other people it doesn't. So without me carrying on much more, this is the thing that you're going to need to do this. You're going to need 4 bundles of plants, and that can be a little vase or a little pot with 2 or 3 different plants on it. In it, a small container of water, a lighter or box of matches, a small container of dirt or sand, metal objects, and a compass. So you get all of these things together, get them all together before you do what we're going to be covering next. So this is what actually you're going to do. And it's important to follow these directions. You go to the east and you place a metal object and you chant Mama Kara Kara Ye Soha. Do it either 3, 7, 21, or 108 times. Then you go to the south, you place a container of water and you chant Mama Kam Kam Ye Soha. Go to the west, place the fire object and chant Mama Ram Ram Ye Soha. Go to the north, place the earth or sand in a container, and chant Mama Su Su Ye Soha. Then you go back through the very same direction and put the plants and chant Mama Poda Poda Ye Soha. Return to the middle of the room and chant Om Agani Agani Achagala Mandala Mataya Soha. I should have said first thing that you do is you go to the middle of your dwelling, apartment, home, what have you, on the main floor, if you've got different floors, but on the main floor, and you find which is the east, south, west, very close. You don't have to be pinpoint accurate, but, do the best that you can. Because that's, the actual name of this practice is controlling the elements, or harnessing the elements. So make sure that you find the best that you can of those directions and, follow the direction that's given here. And you might find that it, will give you some relief. Maybe it won't, but it's worth definitely trying. So let's talk about, we're going to go through the next few things that are mantras in order to, these are beneficial mantras to do. I think that you could do some of these for different things, but we're going to be talking about them. We're talking about these like for preparation to practice. The teachings are the first thing that you should do in the morning is wash your face or hands, or you take a shower. And I find it incredibly effective of while you are washing your face or taking a shower that you chant to yourself. It's a little hard to do with water on your face, but chant either the long or short Vajrasattva mantra. And as you are cleaning your face or taking this body, your shower, you see the negative or the bad karma, leaving. Your obscurations, the things that are holding you back or keeping you from your practice. You see that and you say the mantra. The next thing is to chant homage to the Buddha and receive the daily blessings the Buddha can give you. And that chant you say 3 times, and it's Lama to Pam Chin Dinde, Dejin She, Padra Champa, Yangdak Parazon Pe, Sanjay Bel Gelwa, Shakya Tu Pala, Changsalo, or Changsal Zing Kiab So Chi Wo, Cho Du Jinji Lab Tu So. So you say that 3 times, and that kind of gets you, ready to, practice. I think most people do practice. If you are daily practitioners, you practice either at night or in the morning. A lot of practice both. So this is a good way to start your day. I forgot the cleaning of your dwelling. When you go into your practice space, you always want to make sure it's immaculate. And while you're cleaning, you say Durapang Timapang. And it's another thing that you visualize as you're cleaning up, that you are cleaning, the obscurations everywhere for yourself. And this is also, you don't have to just, anytime you're cleaning, say this mantra to yourself. And as you clean, you see that you're cleaning, your obscurations. This is what to me is a good thing. When you're going about your day or doing something, say mantras, instead of daydreaming. I've talked about that practice that I suggest people do about, you do the mantra while you visualize people and, you say them while you're to yourself when you're out in public. You are giving other sentient beings the benefit of the mantra. And, that's a really good thing to do. At least I found it incredibly beneficial to me. I will pick a deity. This is one of the first things I really did. I would pick a deity and I would say the mantra over and over. I'd either do it 1,000,000 times or 100,000 times. And, you always generate the right motivation, do what you're doing, and then dedicate to the dedication. So there's 3 pre-practice mantras, and you can use this first one anytime in any room in the house. If the Tibetan practice the dorje and bell, bara and bell, they both very, very important to Tantric Buddhism. And if you ring that bell and you want to clear negativity out of your space or out of wherever this is heard. I know somebody that they have a certain relative that comes and visits, and the first thing they do when they leave is they get out the bell. But you chant Om Emma Yushant Unisha Bimale Umfe, and you ring the bell, say that, and you ring the bell while you say it 7 times. The other thing to do is if you get a new mala, and some people like to do this every day to purify and enhance the practice. Malas are what you count mantras on. Those are the rosary, or I prefer mala. Rosary is a little too Christian for me. But you have that is what you count your mantras on. And the way you do that is you hold the mantra, you say Rutsirya Mani Pravarteya Hum. You say that 7 times, and then a lot of people like to blow their breath on the mantra. I always do that, especially do that. I think if you don't every day, that's up to you. But whenever you get a new mala, definitely do this little mantra there. Another way to generate motivation. This is another one. I like this too. Dangde Zen Donjokla Dagji Jangsam Sempa Kyabdo. So you say that 3 times. That's another motivation generator that you can do. When you make offerings, this is a very good mantra to do if you make offerings. And if you do the water bowls, or you do the light the candle, light the incense. This is a really effective and more beautiful mantra to do. It imbues every part of the practice to be beneficial for yourself and other beings. Before and always put it on top. You say Om Ahum every time you are putting something on your altar. It's always important to say Om Ahum. Om is the universal. That's the big mantra of all mantra-orientated religion. But the Tibetan tradition, Ahum, is every bit as important as the Om. So you let's say and you can always, every time you light incense or you light a candle, it's like a blessing. And by the way, you can use this, say to yourself 3 times. This is a 3-time mantra, as a blessing for your food. You're offering this is like you're offering this to the deities. You're offering this to the Buddhists, and this is your offering, and then you get a blessing in return. So the mantra is Namo Bhavagati Varasoha Parmadaniyan Tathagatiya Arhat Samyaksam Buddhayaya Tadyatha Om Varava Mahavara Mahatizivara Mahavijavara Maribodhichitavara Mahabodhimendakasam Karamana Vara Soa Karamana Arva Ishudana Vajrasattva. It takes a little bit of time to memorize this. You'll have to say it if you use it a few times, but very effective, very wonderful mantra to do whenever you're making any type of offering. And when you do, the thing about prayer, or before you eat, you're offering this to, that's important to do. Make an offering. You're offering the food first, and then your food is blessed. Now, multiplying mantras. I want to talk a little bit about this first, because I get people asking me this all the time. Okay, if this increases the merit of a prostration 1,000 times, and I'm doing, how bad was I that I'm having to have merit increased 1,000 times, or virtue mantras, it increases the merit 100,000 times. The main reason is that we have a lot of things to clean up. When the Buddha was trying to help explain this, because our mind, we think very linear of what we know. We base everything on this illusion and sometimes delusion that we've created. And we tend to look at things in time and space of what we can comprehend. Very few people even really comprehend the vastness of this universe. Buddha suggested that this is far from the only game in town. And, he talked about as many beings as sand on the beach. That's incomprehensible to, most people would say that's myth. But the Buddha was trying to tell people that, this, your way of looking at things, you should understand if you're delusional in most everything that you're doing, your scientific calculations are probably going to be a little bit skewed too. The Buddha explained the precious human rebirth, that you are born into a place where you can practice Dharma and you end up practicing Dharma. He said that's about as common as a tortoise in the sea. You throw a yoke in the sea, and a tortoise every 100 years will just poke its head up through the yoke by sheer coincidence, so to speak. And that's how difficult it is, and especially we've talked about this many times of, the precious human rebirth. It's so fragile, but you're so blessed to have a human, the human body and human experience. And it's interesting because some scientists are starting to talk a little bit more about the vastness too. Quantum physics is basically saying that we really don't have a concept of what's really going on outside. We've got some interesting issues. I mean, it was interesting to me that I heard something that Stephen Hawkins was saying about, I'm kind of going on a fun tangent here, but he was talking about these people that really are excited about aliens. And his view is, keep those things away, keep those people away, because they probably want to eat you. They would, if they're smart enough to get here, they're way, way ahead of where we are as far as intellect would go. But when you do these prostrations, each time you do a prostration, and we've covered how to do prostrations in some of the other classes. And most of you that are hearing this, you already understand what prostration is. But you say, Om Namo Manjushri, Namo Sushiri, Namo Uttama Shiri Showa before each prostration. Prostrations in and of themselves purify the karma and the body. The mantra is, let's go into a little bit to the point here. The reason you do the prostration of itself, is it purifies the karma of the body. And then when you say the mantra, it purifies the speech. And if sometimes people will just say refuge prayer when they do prostrations. And then mentally, when you have supreme faith in the teachings, it purifies the mind. That's the thing that's important to understand. You have to have faith in what the teachings are telling you to purify your mind. Always question. The instruction is very clear. Don't believe in anything. Try it out first. But when you have faith in that purifies the mind. And then when you do this mantra, it purifies all three of them, 1,000 times. And then the virtue mantra, you chant this. This will, for things that you're doing for your practices, your daily practice, your evening practice, any practice you do, you chant this 7 times first thing when you sit down to practice. Is Zambara Zambara Vimanasara Mahadasa Hum Mara Vimanakara Mahadasa to Hum. You chant that 7 times, and that helps your virtuous activities when you're doing your practice. Another multiplying This increases the merit in any and everything you do in your daily, your day-to-day life. You are compassionate. This is another 100,000. It multiplies you are compassionate, in your work, or you are living you're doing about your daily day. You're acting like a Dharma practitioner. It's this gives you merit for that. Again, if you're doing it just for the merit, not so swift. But if you're doing it because you want to be doing this so that you can help other sentient beings and yourself, then it's wonderful to do. So the first part is, there's 4 parts, 4 steps to this. The first is chant Chondende Dezing Shengpa, Jo Champak Yang Dag Parzompe, Sanje Nampo Nongze, Oke Kebala Chengsalo. Say that 3 times. And then the second is Changsum Sempa Sempa Kunto, Chimpo Kunto Zang Pola Chengsalo. And then 7 times, Teryatha Ompensa Dia Ave Bode Ne Soha. Say that 7 times. And then Duru Dukaza Mukea Soha 7 times. And a lot of people start to understand a few things. You do enough of these, you see certain words over and over again. Sanjay is the Tibetan word for Buddha. And then La Chengsa Lo, that means I bow down. So just a little bit, interesting. You start seeing certain words and you can begin to understand a little bit of what their meaning is. Mantras for compassion to animals. This first one is when you bless the feet. That's so if you step on any creature, kill it, it will be reborn. Some feel it will be in a pure land or in a much better, higher karmic, a more meritorious and more beneficial lifetime. And you say 7 times, Om Kre Sa Ragana Hum Shi Soha. Say it 7 times and then lick your finger and touch your feet. Then the old school was you spit on your feet, but just, lick your finger and touch your feet. We talked about medicine Buddha mantra for, if you eat meat. And this is a real interesting and somewhat touchy subject for some people, that, this vegetarianism. I have my 2 Buddha teachers, Holiness the Dalai Lama and Wangchen Rinpoche. They have both of them, a little bit of a different view. Holiness the Dalai Lama really prefers and suggests vegetarianism. However, he is not a vegetarian himself. He tried to be a vegetarian. He had some severe health concerns, so he eats meat every other day. And when I say eat meat, it's not like he sits down and has a big piece of prime rib. It's pieces. It's not the main part of the meal. But the Buddha's instruction. Some people say he swore you had to be a vegetarian. No, the Buddha said when you are getting your alms, in the morning, monks in the Buddhist time, they would go and beg for food, alms, and it was a very meritorious thing for people to give, the Buddhist monks their food, and the Buddha said whatever they give you, you accept. If they gave you just meat, that's what you needed to eat. But the Buddha said there were 5 meats that you didn't eat, and I think I remember: human, jackal, lion, tiger, snake. That's all I can remember. I have 5 or 6. That's what I'm not quite sure the other 2, but you can Google that if you want. Vegetarianism and Buddha. Many of us, my father, much to his chagrin, my family, in Wyoming, they hunted. And my father was, though, he was very clear that he only would be male animals because the females could reproduce more, and that, we ate what was killed. It wasn't like going to waste. But I could never hunt. There was no way I could shoot anything like that. I think that this was I didn't realize it then, but it was a very good indicator about where my life was going to go as far as religion. One thing I've had some friends of mine do that I really wish they wouldn't do anymore. They go to these exotic sushi restaurants where they kill the animal in front of you. And I don't think that karma is very good, because the Buddha said also, you don't eat something that's killed just for you. If like you say, okay, I'm here, cut the chicken's head off because I want to eat, that's not very good to do. So this mantra is the primary mantra that purifies any fault of eating meat, and it assures that the animal will be born in a much better realm. That's the key thing, is that this benefits the animal too. It will be a much, much, much better place for the animal. So in some ways, the animal gets to really benefit. That doesn't mean that you go out there and decide you're going to be strictly a carnivore. By the way, Holiness the Karmapa is also very, very, very to the point about being a vegetarian. But this mantra, the blessing of the meat, is Om Abira Ketsara Hum. You say that 7 times before you indulge in any eating of meat. Final one we're going to talk about, mantras for your dreams to come true. It's important that you understand, first of all, that you don't say a mantra so you get a parking space. If you are so mundane with these mantras, they're really not going to benefit you as much, because what you're doing is you're testing them, so to speak. If they're really going to work, I'm going to get a parking space. You show the mantra the reverence that it deserves, and that's when they become special. It's not that you don't ever say them, but if you're talking about something for your dreams to come true, it's something very beneficial, and most of the time make sure that it's something that benefits all sentient beings. And the first 108 times is Deshin Sheng Pa Tsa Sing Gyalpala Cheng Salo Didyatha Dari Dari Dane Vajrasattva. Say that 108 times. And then the next mantra you say 3 times. Chomdin Dede Shing Pa Jo Chum Yang Dak Parzong Pe Sanjay Noboy Dong Mon Lam Tam Che Rabuta Dupa Gyalpala Cheng Salo. And sometimes when you do the first 8, you write down what it is that you want to see come true, and you put that underneath your pillows. Is some of the instructions some give. Now, I just told you not to do something, really mundane with these, but I had a very miraculous, in my mind, experience with this mantra. Some of you know, I have a very serious attachment to my dog. I love my dog dearly. It's probably way too great of an attachment at this point in time. But one day, I don't know how it happened. The door, we were living in this neighborhood, and the door was right outside. And I came into the living room, and Kelson was gone. The door was wide open, and I ran around screaming and yelling, looking for this dog. And Ryan came home from work, and we put up signs, and somebody said, well, a woman had a dog. I don't know, I think it might have been yours, and she was asking around. Put some signs up, and maybe she'll come around. She said she was going to come back later. So we put a bunch of signs up, and I was very, very distraught, and I waited till 11, 12. We still hadn't heard from her. And I said this mantra. I did this, 108 times. And I had a feeling after I did it that everything was going to be all right. And I felt that Ryan was going to hear about this and everything would be all right. And about 9 o'clock, Ryan called from work, and he said, she has Kelson, and this is where you go pick him up. So, it is a bit mundane, but I can tell you that these mantras that I shared with you today, they've benefited me in many, many, many ways. And when I talk about them, the deeper your practice goes, the deeper the mantra goes. It's very, very true. You can, excuse me for coughing there. It's a wonderful thing. It's wonderful practices to do. Find the ones that really speak to you. and do them. If they work for you, fine. If they don't, well, that's fine too. This is our last class in this series, and we always talk about, we really appreciate your tax deductible donations. We've got a lot of things just about ready to go as far as our social programs, and giving to Dharma-orientated organizations. There's merit and benefit for you as long as you don't do it for the merit, and it's not the size of your donation. It's how and why you're giving the donation. So we appreciate them greatly. There's a few things, we're going to be talking about some evening discussions. We're going to definitely do one about depression. I have a lot of people who have talked to me about that issue. We might do a complete class on the Jambhala practices, because you don't have to have an empowerment to do those. And we are also going to be hosting the Los Angeles premiere of When the Iron Bird Flies. I've talked about that, saying Padmasambhava gave that prophecy that when the iron bird flies and the horses run on wheels, the Tibetans will be scattered like ants in the wind, and the Dharma will flourish in the land of the red people. And this movie talks about that prophecy. This is obviously the red-faced people where we live now. Maybe not, but I think so. And it's a really wonderful movie. And we'll let you know more about that. We might even be showing that movie at the same time online. So I appreciate your time, appreciate your patience with me, and I appreciate when you help this organization. I look forward to doing more with you soon, and this has been very rewarding for me, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed doing it. So have a very good day.